And I will hand over to our moderator and welcome back to the stage our extraordinary poet, Miriam Bakar Hussain. Mr. Hussain, the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Excellencies, delegates, and believers that the world is still capable of learning. It is a privilege to chair this plenary at the UN Mine Action Conference. And when we speak about emergency risk education, we are at its core speaking about time. Time between a warning and a misstep, time between exposure and awareness, time between live and irreversible loss. In emergency context, civilians do not have the luxury of learning slowly. Information must travel faster than danger. It must reach further than fear. And it must be understood clearly, immediately, and by those most at risk. This is what makes emergency risk education a humanitarian imperative. Today's session invites us to take stock of what works, what has been proven in the urgency of crisis, and to interrogate how we scale those approaches across different phases of conflict. We will also explore the growing convergence between explosive ordnance risk education and conflict preparedness and protection. An evolution that reminds us that protection cannot be reactive alone, it must be anticipatory. As we listen to experiences from affected countries and partners across the international community, I encourage us to remain anchored in 3 questions. Are we reaching the most vulnerable fast enough? Are we communicating in ways that are understood and not just delivered? And are we building systems that can endure beyond the immediacy of crisis? Because ultimately, the measure of our work is not in the number of messages sent, but in the number of lives that are able to continue safely because the messages were received in time. I am honored to be joined by an exceptional panel of practitioners and experts who bring both field experience and global perspective to this conversation. We have Mr. Khalid Hamdan, who is the General Director of the Sudan National Mine Action Center, who would be bringing insights from national coordination in one of the most complex humanitarian contexts. We also have Ms. Heloise Perry, Global Explosive Ordnance Risk Education Specialist at Humanity and Inclusion, whose work spans advancing risk education practices across multiple regions. And we have Ms. Safa Al-Kahaf, Child Protection Officer with UNICEF Syria, bringing critical perspectives on protecting children in active conflict settings. And we have Mr. Colin Bent, Global Special Advisor on Conflict Preparedness and Protection at the Norwegian People's Aid, contributing to the evolving integration of CPP within risk education frameworks. With that, I look forward to a rich and grounded discussion. Please a round of applause for my panelists. Thank you. I would like to yield the floor to retired Major General Khalid Hamdan, who is the Director General of the National Mine Action Center in Sudan, a position he has held since May 2020. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا. الحضور الكريم، أصحاب السعادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أشكركم على هذه الفرصة لمناقشة موضوع بالغ الأهمية، وهو التوعية بمخاطر الألقام والذخائر المتفجرة في سياق الطوارئ والنزاعات، مع التركيز على تجربة السودان. في الواقع أن السودان يمثل حالة معقدة ومركبة، حيث لم تعد مخاطر الألقام ومخلفات الحرب محصورة في المناطق القتالية التقليدية، بل امتدت بشكل واضح إلى المناطق الحضرية والمدن بما فيها الخرطوم العاصمة. وهذا التحول فرض علينا إعادة التفكير في كيفية تصميم وتنفيذ برامج التوعية بسبب الانتشار الواسع للذخائر غير منفجرة داخل الأحياء السكنية، المدارس، المستشفيات، المناطق الخدمية وحتى المنازل، وهذا ما جعل الخطر يوميا ومباشرا وليس خطرا مؤجلا أو بعيدا. واحدة من أهم الملاحظات في تجربة السودان إن الفئات الأكثر عرضة للخطر ليست فقط المجتمعات القريبة من خطوط المواجهة، بل تشمل الأطفال بسبب الفضول وقلة الوعي، النازحين عند عودتهم لمناطقهم الآمنة والتي تركوها ليس بها أخطار، وكذلك المزارعين والرعاة الذين يعتمدون على الوصول إلى الأراضي المفتوحة. لكن التحدي الحقيقي لا يكمن فقط في هذه المخاطر، بل في فجوات التوعية نفسها. ففي كثير من الحالات تأتي التوعية متأخرة بعد وقوع الحوادث، كما أن الوصول إلى المجتمعات المتأثرة يظل محدوداً بسبب انعدام الأمن وصعوبة الوصول إلى المناطق المتأثرة وضعف البنية التحتية. لماذا التوعية بالمخاطر هي مهمة؟ في السودان أثبتت التجربة أن التوعية بالمخاطر ليست نشاطاً تكاملياً، بل هي تدخل منقذ للحياة. ففي ظل محدودية عمليات إزالة اللغام وبطئها، تصبح التوعية الوسيلة الأساسية لتقليل الإصابات والوفيات، وتكمن أهميتها في الآتي: أولاً، تمكين المجتمعات من التعرف على المخاطر وتجنبها، حماية الفئات الأكثر ضعفاً مثل الأطفال، دعم العودة الآمنة للنازحين واللاجئين، وتعزيز قدرة المجتمعات على التكيف مع المخاطر المستمرة. في السودان، استجابة لهذه التحديات، اعتمد المركز القومي لمكافحة الألقام بالتنسيق مع الشركاء الدوليين والوطنيين نهجاً طارئاً يرتكز على السرعة، الانتشار والمرونة، ويرتكز هذا النهج على 3 محاور رئيسية. أولاً، الانتشار السريع وتوسيع التغطية، ويتم ذلك بنشر فرق التوعية في الولايات الآمنة، استهداف النازحين داخلياً والمجتمعات المستضيفة، دمج أنشطة التوعية ضمن الاستجابة الإنسانية في مراكز اللواء ونقاط توزيع المساعدات. وحتى الآن هنالك فرق تعمل في الولايات لتقديم الرسائل التوعوية. أيضاً، استخدام وسائل قابلة للتوسع ومناسبة للسياق مثل جلسات التوعية المباشرة داخل المجتمعات، الاستعانة بمتطوعين محليين ونقاط اتصال مجتمعية، وذلك بتدريبهم ومن ثم انخراطهم في عملية التوعية. أيضاً استخدام وسائل الإعلام المختلفة حيث أن الرسائل ستصل إلى الجميع، وكذلك مواعظ توعوية بصرية في البيئات ذات الأمية المرتفعة، وقد ساهم ذلك في ضمان وصول الرسائل إلى الفئات الأكثر عرضة للمخاطر. ثالثاً، الدمج بين التوعية والحماية، وذلك بالاستعانة ببعض الجهات التي تقدم نصائح للحماية وإرسال رسائل توعوية تشمل إرشادات عملية حول كيفية التصرف أثناء النزاعات، وكذلك تعزيز الوعي بالسلوكيات الآمنة أثناء الحركة والتنقل، ودعم المجتمعات لتبني إجراءات حماية ذاتية بسيطة وفعالة. وهذا يعكس الانتقال من مجرد التوعية لتعزيز القدرة على الحماية الذاتية. واستخدم السودان في ذلك الوسائط المحلية مثل الإذاعات المجتمعية، المسرح التفاعلي والرسوم التوضيحية البسيطة. كذلك الاستفادة من قادة المجتمع مثل الشيوخ، المعلمون، الناشطون المحليون، وحتى رجال الدين لنشر الرسائل التوعوية. أيضا دمج التوعية في الخدمات الأخرى مثل التعليم، الصحة والمساعدات الإنسانية، واستخدام وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي قدر الإمكان. من تجربة السودان يمكن نخلص إلى بعض الدروس المهمة. أولاً، التوعية يجب أن تكون فورية وسريعة، وهي قد يساعد ذلك في إجابة على السؤال الذي ظهر في بداية الحلقة، أن التوعية لا بد أن تكون فورية وسريعة، وكذلك أن تدمج ضمن الاستجابة الإنسانية منذ اللحظات الأولى للنزاع. أيضاً إشراك المجتمع المحلي ليس خياراً بل هو ضرورة، فقد أثبتت التجربة أن تدريب متطوعين محليين ومعلمين وقادة مجتمعيين هو من أكثر الوسائل فعالية في إيصال الرسائل. أيضاً البساطة في أدوات التوعية هي مفتاح للنجاح. في بيئات النزاع لا تحتاج دائماً إلى أدوات معقدة، بل رسائل بسيطة تصل إلى الجميع. أيضاً خلصنا إلى أن التوعية المجتمعية المباشرة أكثر فعالية من الرسائل العامة، وأن الأطفال رغم أنهم الأكثر عرضة ولكنهم أيضاً جزء من الحل عندما يتم تدريبهم بطريقة سليمة ومناسبة، يصبحون ناقلين لهذه المعرفة داخل أسرهم. وكذلك يمكن أهم درس أنه الاستمرارية في الجهود التوعوية. التوعية ليست عمل منقطع ولكن عمل مستمر حتى الوصول إلى انعدام المخاطر. هنالك عدد من التحديات التي تجابه العمل في مجال التوعية في السودان. يمكن أبرز هذه التحديات هي صعوبة الوصول إلى بعض المناطق بسبب التحديدات الأمنية، أيضاً محدودية الموارد والفجوات التمويلية كغيرها من أنشطة مكافحة الألغام. أيضاً النزوح المستمر يعقد من عملية الوصول لكافة الفئات المستهدفة، وأيضاً تعقيدات التلوث في البيئة الحضرية والمدن. لكن توصيات لنخرج من هذه اللغة بتوصيات أهمها اعتبار التوعية والمخاطر أولوية إنسانية منقذة للحياة ودمجها في جميع خطط الاستجابة والطوارئ، وكذلك زيادة الاستثمار في برامج التوعية الطارئة خاصة تلك التي تقبل التوسع السريع. تعزيز الربط بين التوعية والجاهزية للحماية من خلال تطوير أدوات وإرشادات مشتركة مع بقية القطاعات، ولا بد من دعم السلطات الوطنية لقيادة وتنسيق جهود التوعية بما يعزز الملكية الوطنية والاستدامة. في الختام، الشكر الجزيل لكل الحاضرين على هذه الفرصة. فقد أثبتت التجربة في السودان أن التوعية بالمخاطر في حالات الطوارئ ليس خياراً بل هي حق أساسي منقذ للحياة. إن حماية المدنيين من مخاطر الذخائر المتفجرة تتطلب إلى جانب أعمال الإزالة توعية فعالة سريعة وشاملة تمكن المجتمعات من حماية نفسها. ونقول إن ما نجح في السودان هو التوعية السريعة المحلية والبسيطة، وما لم ينجح هو النهج المتأخر والمركزي. وما نحتاجه الآن هو استثمار أكبر في بناء قدرات المجتمعات نفسها لتكون جزء من الحل. وشكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much, General Khalid, for sharing that. Please, a round of applause for General Khalid. Thank you so much. We would move on. Thank you. We would move on to Eloise Perry, who has held various positions with the Humanity and Inclusion since 2018 at the headquarters and in the field in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And she's currently HI's Global Explosive Ordnance Risk Education Specialist, and she is also co-chairing the Emergency Risk Education Task Team under the EORE Advisory Group. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Bukharasan, and good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are facing an unprecedented level of armed conflict. In 2025 alone, the ICRC recorded more than 130 armed conflicts worldwide. And increasingly, it is civilians who bear the brunt, facing repeated, intense, and unpredictable violence, often in densely populated areas where the use of explosive weapons has devastating and long-lasting effects. To give you a sense of the scale of the problem, Action on Armed Violence reported that 2024 saw a 29% increase of explosive weapons incidents and a 69% increase of civilian casualties compared to 2023. In these environments, people are not only exposed to physical harm, but also to constant uncertainty. They are forced to make life or death decisions every day, without always having the information they need to protect themselves and their families. This is where explosive ordnance risk education, and more specifically, conflict preparedness and protection, play a critical role. At Humanity and Inclusion, we have seen firsthand that traditional risk education, while essential, is no longer sufficient on its own. It has historically focused on contamination after strikes, on what remains once the damage is done. But today's conflicts are evolving rapidly. Civilians are exposed to new and complex threats. The use of FPV drones, the widespread and intense use of explosive weapons in urban areas, and patterns of violence that are increasingly unpredictable. This is why we have expanded our approach to include conflict preparedness and protection, or CPP. This means equipping people not only to recognize and avoid explosive hazards, but also to prepare in advance for crisis, understand risks during active hostilities, and adopt immediate protective behaviors. Because ultimately, this is about saving lives. Risk education and CPP are not optional add-ons to humanitarian response. They are life-saving interventions. They give people agency that can mean the difference between life and death in a matter of seconds. And more than that, they are a matter of rights. Access to information that allows civilians to protect themselves in armed conflict shall be understood as a fundamental component of the protection of civilians. It is closely linked to the right to life, to dignity, and to informed decision-making in situations of extreme risk. Yet, despite this, risk education and CPP remain critically underfunded and too often under-prioritized. At HI, we are working to address this gap through a multi-sectoral approach. One of our key strengths is our ability to combine our effort on localizing and strengthening local capacity and integrating risk education and CPP into broader humanitarian response. For example, by delivering risk education and CPP material at food distribution points or in shelter, like we do in Gaza, or in schools, like we do in the West Bank, or through emergency mobile teams combining rehabilitation, prosthetics, and risk education services, as we have done in Afghanistan and in Iraq. We also adapt this approach to environmental hazard settings, such as in northeast Syria, after the earthquake, where we delivered a combined risk education and disaster risk reduction response. And because we know that conflict and contamination also affect mental health, HI ensures that our risk education teams are trained in psychosocial first aid, especially in EWIPA settings such as Gaza or Lebanon. But we also know that no single organization can do this alone. Last year, HI published a report called Saving Lives in Conflict, which sets out a clear agenda for strengthening civilian protection in contexts affected by explosive weapons. One of its key recommendations was the need to better capture, develop, and share practical tools and good practices, and to do so in collaboration with local actors and across sector. This is exactly the role of the Emergency Risk Education Task Team. Established in April 2024, under the Risk Education Advisory Group, the Emergency Risk Education Task Team brings together experts from various organizations to focus specifically on emergency contexts. Given its limited capacities, it prioritizes three areas of work: explosive weapons in conflict, incendiary weapons, and risk education in environmental hazard settings. Its objective is not only to produce guidance, but to make it usable, practical, and adapted to rapidly evolving contexts. As of today, through the task team, we created online libraries gathering guidance and materials on each work's focus of the task team. Briefing papers have been produced to ensure consistencies and common definitions among operators, and shared dashboards have been developed, tracking, for example, incidents related to incendiary weapons or environmental hazard combined with explosive ordnance contamination data. The task team also actively promotes collaboration with actors beyond mine action, across protection, education, health, international humanitarian law, disaster risk reduction, and social and behavioral change. Through external presentation from various specialists, but also through multisectoral workshops, the task team aims to encourage multisectoral expertise in the development of tools and guidance for the implementation of emergency risk education. Because if we are serious about protecting civilians, we need to break silos. And in the context of shrinking humanitarian resources, platforms like the Emergency Risk Education Task Team are more important than ever to avoid duplication, to maximize impact, and to ensure that knowledge is shared where it is most needed. Which brings me to EORE. Following the recommendation of Saving Lives in Conflict report, and thanks to a strong partnership between UNICEF, UNMAS, NPA, MAG, the GICHD, and HI, we are officially launching today the Early Response Network for Risk Education and CPP, or the EORE. Its purpose is quite simple. It is to provide rapid technical support in emerging crises, particularly in contexts where mine action capacity is limited or not yet present. We are at the very initial stage of establishing this new network. The EORE is designed to be agile, practical, and operational. It will pool expertise across sector, risk education and CPP, of course, but also information management, medical response, education, and social and behavioral change. It will monitor a limited number of emerging crises, establish early connection within country actors, and provide tailored tools, messaging, and technical guidance to support frontline responders. In short, it is about ensuring that the right people that the right knowledge reaches the right people at the right time. But for the EORE, and for risk education and CPP more broadly, to reach their full potential, we need collective commitment. So let me end with two clear calls to action. First, to donors. We need increased, flexible, and predictable funding for risk education and CPP in emergency settings. These interventions are cost-effective, scalable, and immediately impactful, but they are too often overlooked in funding priorities. Investing in risk education and CPP means investing in prevention. It means also reducing casualties, reducing pressures on health systems, and enabling communities to better cope with and navigate conflict. Quite simply, it means saving lives. Second, to national authorities. We encourage you to recognize risk education and CPP as core components of civilian protection, and to invest in the human, technical, and institutional capacities required to implement them effectively. These include integrating risk education and CPP into national systems, working closely with local actors, and ensuring that communities have access to timely, accurate, and context-specific information. Because ultimately, the ability of civilians to protect themselves should not depend on chance. It should be ensured, supported, and sustained. And collectively, we have the responsibility and the means to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. I would move on to Safa Al-Kahaf. She has 10 years of humanitarian experience and she leads UNICEF's EORE program while also chairing the EORE Technical Working Group in Syria. Safa, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam, and thanks for colleagues for this presentation, and thanks for these opportunities here. So now let's move for Syria. For Syria, while active hostilities in Syria has been subsided, but the threats of people, including children's lives, has not. Across all the country, UXO continue to endanger all every day. Hidden hazards are causing death and serious injury, while the war ended, but the danger did not. In Syria, since 8 December 2014, we have more than 1,181 accidents and incidents among all of Syria, and this caused, unfortunately, for 2,166 casualties, including 771 were killed, and the most of them were unfortunately men, then children and women, and we have 395 injured. Unfortunately, those are the recorded number, but there are a lot of cases were not recorded because of lack of having that platform in place for all data. We have EORE in Syria, but we have a lot of challenges to work in EORE. One of them is whispered and complex contamination, as we don't have any map for contamination area in Syria, and we are relying only on accident and incidents reports to know where are the UXO there. Also, we have a challenge related to change in the context from time to time, and we have rapid change all the time. Also, we have access we have lack of access for some communities, which prevent us from conducting EORE there. Beside all of this, we have limitation for alignment with underlying risk drivers, as sometimes the EORE will be standalone activity without linking it with the actual drivers. Beside that, we have also lack of reaching the most vulnerable and the most affected people. As I highlighted, that the men is one of very highest casualties, but unfortunately they are the least who are reaching in our activity. Also, we have limited and sustained fund. Beside that, we have a lot of population movement and high number of returnees, and this is one of very high challenge in Syria, as we have high number of returnees coming from outside the country, including Europe and Turkey and Jordan, who has zero knowledge about those risks in Syria. And a lot of them are coming back, opening their home, and they will be facing one of rocks or mines in their home. And we have several of those cases who lost their life due to lack of this knowledge. Beside that, we have a lot of good opportunities and great implementing partners. Recently, in this year, we have a National Mine Action Center for first time in Syria, and this is really will be the governmental entity who is leading the all mine action work, including EORE, and they will be the governmental body who will endorse and coordinate all mine action and EORE in Syria. Also, we have great governmental entities who are working with us. We have Ministry of Education, while we integrated EORE messages in the national curriculum, and they became part of the study in the school among all of Syria. And recently, we have integrated also in non-classroom activity guideline and book EORE messages, where all teachers will give them as a mandatory activity for all children among all of Syria. And here we have also prioritizing the returnees children. So whenever the Ministry of Education have a high number of returnees children, they will give them high priority to target them in EORE session. Besides that, also, there is a great partner who is Ministry of Health, where integrated EORE messages and embedded in the vaccination campaign and advocacy for vaccination campaign, while we have all vaccination team are going through door-to-door activities in vaccination or advocacy for vaccination, and they are delivering EORE messages there. Besides that, we have the General Administrative Authority for Palestinian Refugees in Syria, who are able to reach all Palestinian refugees among all the country, and they are delivering EORE program among all of the country for children and their caregivers. Besides that, also, we have new opportunities and coordination under the umbrella of National Mine Action Center in the coordination with Ministry of Awqaf and Religion to target people through religion prayer. I mean, weekly religion prayer on Friday or on Sunday. And this is also will help us to target more men and be able to reach more people. Besides that, also, we are working with Ministry of Economic in many platforms to integrate EORE messages in some industrial way, like having for children product EORE messages there. Besides that, also, we having also opportunity to have with the EORE messages with the General Authority for Borders, while we can target returnees when they are enter Syria in the airport or in the border of Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. With this platform will help us to give them EORE messages before they go back to their home and discover any surprise there. Besides that, also, we have a local NGO who are among all of the country. We have Safe Land, we have Shafaq, we have Bahar, and we have very small NGO who are working in many locations, but honestly, they are reaching the most affected people. And even their target or achievement sometimes is very small, but they are really doing a great job in terms of targeting the most needed people. Besides all of this, we have also international NGO as a MAG, DCA, DRC, and NBA, and Halo Trust and HI, who are working with us in all of this area. Also, we have UN agency, including UNMAS, UNICEF, UNDP, and UNHCR. Besides that, I will highlight here the achievement that we did last year, and also you can see this map, while we have EORE activity among all the country in the affected area. And this will be maybe linked to the map of casualties and incidents, because where we have incidents and casualty, we do more EORE activities. And also here you can see also that among all of the other country, we have a target in each governorate, and we are reaching people there. But if you go for the last chart, you will see that most targeted people are children who are in the young age, while we have less targets for men which I highlighted in our challenges. Besides that, we did sort of integration of CBB in coordination with NBA for EORE messages, and this came after Syria Take the Freedom, where we have a big movement for people. We integrated CBB messages in EORE, and this has helped us to make community more ready for any emergency. And after that, when we have a lot of emergency, we have at least community who are aware what to do in this, let's say, emergency context, beside having full baggage of EORE messages. And this helps us also to work more on community-based awareness-raising activities, while people are understanding the CBB and EORE. Let's say now and move for the best approaches and the plan. In general, we have improved for target based on the, let's say, risk profile, including men and boys. And here we worked in the EORE technical working group on having practical operation on better targeting men in EORE. And this helped us to find or address where we can target men more, they are the most affected people. And also we have tailored age group, let's say, messages for EORE, so where we can have for each age special EORE messages there. Also, we developed sort of seasonal EORE messages where we have, let's say, some seasonal places where we launch EORE campaign as we have a truffle season, which is now ongoing in Syria. And before this season, we prepared sort of full package for truffle season and disseminated among all of EORE technical working group partners and ministries for sure, so they can make people more aware before, let's say, before going and let's say put themselves in danger. Also, we have strong coordination in the EORE technical working group under the Mine Action EOR and with full support of Mine Action EOR. And we designed with this technical plan where we can find all EORE need there, including like having impact assessment and having, let's say, address all national technical standards and having one TOC there. And with this flexible plan, we are doing sort of, let's say, flexibility in responding for each need whenever it was raised by the technical members. And then we can reach out all of people that we are targeting. Finally, just I want to highlight, like, peace in Syria cannot grow on dangerous ground. We need to ensure that Syria is safe for all people, including children, and we need everyone to be safe and ensure safe future for our children in Syria. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Safa, for sharing that. Very insightful. I would like to move on to Mr. Colin Bent. He has been working in mine action for over 13 years, and he is currently a global special advisor for Conflict Preparedness and Protection, Norwegian People's Aid's Mine Action and Disarmament Section. He has years of experience working in the Gaza Strip and has been co-chair of the Gaza EORE CPP Technical Working Group since the end of 2023. Mr. Colin.
Thanks very much for the kind introduction. It's an honor to be here with you at the 29th NDM and to be asked to speak on today's panel representing the OPT Mine Action Area of Responsibilities EORE CPP Technical Working Groups for both Gaza and the West Bank. While EORE and CPP activities have been implemented for many years in Gaza and the West Bank before October 7th, 2023, emergency risk education has since been an absolutely critical component of the current humanitarian response in Palestine, particularly in Palestine. Particularly in Gaza, the design, adaptation, and implementation of emergency risk education over the course of the conflict, and still today following the ceasefire, has been heavily defined by the context and the risk environment we face. Risk education in Gaza has not only sought to mitigate the risks of explosive ordnance contamination left over from fighting, but also the risks posed by explosive weapons used in populated areas through pairing EORE with CPP risk education. Given the scale of the conflict in Gaza and the lack of clearance capacity to remove explosive ordnance risks at present, a primary focus of explosive ordnance risk education in Gaza has been to ensure that people avoid high-risk areas such as rubble, damaged buildings, former battle areas, and abandoned areas, including abandoned military sites and equipment. Gaza's urban areas have been largely decimated by the use of explosive weapons, resulting in over 76% of housing units becoming damaged or destroyed, and an estimated 61 million tons of rubble generated where contamination risk is extremely high. Contamination in damaged buildings and rubble poses a significant risk to both returnees and reconstruction workers and directly inhibits reconstruction efforts. EORE therefore has to be targeted specifically towards debris clearance workers so that they're aware of EO risks, how to recognize them, and what to do if they encounter suspicious objects. Displacement and economic deprivation that has been caused by the conflict has greatly increased the vulnerability of most residents in Gaza, as movement and gathering of resources such as water and supplies greatly increases their exposure. Children, especially boys, make up roughly half of recorded EO accident victims, and meanwhile, professions such as construction workers, as I mentioned before, farmers, and scrap collectors are all at risk due to the nature of their work. As such, our sector has worked very diligently in order to target these groups and tailor our messaging in order to meet their needs. The design and implementation of EORE CPP activities has had to conform to the myriad challenges on the ground, primarily in the Gaza Strip, but also in the West Bank. Over 1.9 million Palestinians have been displaced as a result of the Gaza conflict, most of which are now forced to live in temporary shelters. During the conflict, population movements were constant as new areas came under bombardment and were subjected to evacuation warnings. This, of course, has been a major challenge for the targeting of risk education, since focusing on specific geographic locations meant that there was no guarantee that we were working towards a specific set target for achievement. In addition, CPP safety messaging that had been implemented from 2015 to 2023 had largely focused on how households could prepare their home, but now that those homes, those houses, those apartments are largely destroyed, our messaging had to be adapted to be more suitable for IDPs. It goes without saying that EORE CPP activities have been heavily constrained by access restrictions, whether by the dynamic security situation or by the imposition of the so-called yellow line, which now divides Gaza in two, or by restrictions on the entry of international humanitarian staff into Gaza. And without an effective EOD capacity on the ground in Gaza, EORE cannot be considered a kind of stopgap measure to be implemented until such time explosive ordnance is removed. Instead, we need to think of explosive ordnance risk education as an ongoing activity that is even more important to civilian safety, given that clearance operations are not really taking place. At the same time, renewed conflict remains a possibility, meaning that EWIPA risks and new explosive ordnance contamination must continue to be addressed. I've spoken at length now about Gaza, but also EORE CPP activities are important in the West Bank, where the increased militarization of security operations and intensification of explosive weapons use are a growing risk for civilians. EORE CPP facilities face barriers to movement and access on a regular basis, and which makes operating difficult. The Palestinian Mine Action Center is responsible for leading and coordinating the sector in the West Bank. However, considerable gaps exist in capacity and in access. Lastly, the opportunities for funding and resources in support of EORE and CPP in the West Bank have been limited. Given the nature of the context, mine action operators have been focused on delivering interpersonal EORE CPP via three key modalities. The first is rapid EORE CPP sessions, or emergency risk education sessions, which are delivered in under 15 minutes and are designed to communicate only the most important core safety messaging in as little time as possible. These sessions constituted roughly 1/3 of the sessions delivered in Gaza and were particularly effective during the higher intensity periods of the conflict when delivery was the most time critical. The session standard, however, that the sector aims to deliver are formal, high-quality EORE CPP sessions, which should ideally be delivered in a 45-minute or more time span. These formal sessions are able to cover a lot more ground and provide for more interaction and attention necessary to communicate a complete risk education package. And lastly, the provision of EORE CPP training of trainers, or TOT, support has helped develop the capacity of local and international actors to deliver activities in the field. The use of mass media approaches has been a critical component of emergency risk education outreach in Palestine. At the outset of the conflict, social media and SMS text messages were the main means of reaching people with safety messaging when the security situation meant that interpersonal approaches were impossible. And they remain an effective means of communicating safety messaging today. We have seen the use of radio, podcasts, and videos as effective digital EORE approaches, both in Gaza and the West Bank. And we see continued use of murals, billboards, posters, and materials distribution as all effective means of print and physical media methods of raising awareness as well. A lot of what has been accomplished when it comes to explosive ordnance risk education and CPP in Gaza in the West and the West Bank has been facilitated and supported by the OPT Mine Action, AOR's EORE CPP technical working groups. The TWGs have served as a key forum to coordinate activities and develop tools, materials, and resources for use across the sector. More and more, we are aiming to improve EORE CPP activities through the delivery of standards, guidelines, safety messaging, training packages, materials, and media for use for the entire sector. I can't stress enough also the importance of UNMAS's role in establishing an information management system for the sector that continues to allow us to track EORE and CPP operations on a monthly basis and prioritize our operations accordingly. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and also the opportunity to speak today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colling. So we're going to move to the second session of this panel, and we're going to try and do it maybe in about under 20 minutes, because we would also like to take a statement from the audience and also possibly questions. And I would like to begin with Mr. Khalid Hamdan. My question to you is, in the light of security challenges and the funding constraints that you're facing and UN Mine Action is facing, how can the sustainability of risk education programs be ensured?
شكرا على هذا السؤال. أعتقد أفضل الممارسات في التوعية كما ذكرنا هو تدريب المجتمعات المحلية على تقديم التوعية لمجتمعاتهم والرسائل التي تفهم حسب المجتمع. فتدريب هذه المجتمعات على تقديم رسائل التوعية ستبقى التوعية موجودة في هذه المجتمعات، وحتى إذا انعدم الدعم والتمويل ستكون هذه الرسائل موجودة لهذه المجتمعات ومواصلة هذه المجتمعات في هذا العمل. أيضا إشراك التمويل الآن هو بيكون من التمويل أممي وتمويل عن طريق الحكومة، لكن هنالك قطاع آخر ممكن إدخاله في عملية التمويل وهو القطاع الخاص في كل منطقة من المناطق. هذا القطاع الخاص لديه أدوار إنسانية يمكن يقدمها لهذه المجتمعات، وبالتالي في حالة انعدام التمويل ممكن إدخال هذا القطاع الخاص لتمويل عمليات التوعية. أيضا كما ذكرنا دمج التوعية في القطاعات الأخرى وخاصة في التعليم. نحن في السودان عندنا تجارب سابقة في دمج التوعية في مناهج الدراسية للمجتمعات المتضررة، وحتى الآن هذه المناهج موجودة والمدارس موجودة وتتلقى التوعية دائما من ضمن الحصص الدراسية الموجودة في هذه المدارس، وبالتالي التوعية مستمرة في هذه المدارس حتى في حالة انعدام التمويل بسبب وجود هذه المناهج. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much for sharing. My next question is for you, Ms. Eloise Perry. What are the non-negotiable requirements to deliver the EORE and conflict preparedness and protection in emergencies, you'd say?
So I would say that there are several requirements to deliver effective risk education and CPP, especially in emergencies. First one being obviously funding. But when I mean funding, I also mean funding prior to the crisis. It can be under small envelopes that are planned for emergency only prior to a crisis. It can be through crisis modifiers that includes risk education and CPP as an emergency response. There are several ways to make sure that this response is anticipated prior to any crisis. So as I mentioned, anticipation is key, which also means that internally as operators, but also as national authority, for instance, we need to draft strategies in advance. We need to know exactly what we are planning to do in case of an emergency before the emergency actually happens. But I would say that the most important things for us is really the community network and engagement, and more broadly, when we are facing a crisis, we have to deal with existing capacities. It can be through communities itself. Most of the time, actually, it is. For instance, for humanity and inclusion, following the 7th of October 2023 in Gaza, at that time, we didn't have any risk education activities. However, we used to have projects in Gaza, where we trained and supported community focal points on risk education and CPP. And following the 7th of October, they are the ones who came to us saying, we are here, we are trained, and we want to be part of the response. So definitely, it is one of the most important requirements, having already a network in the communities. But it is also working with national authorities, of course, because they do have capacities and they do have local partners that we need to engage in the response. Local partners are fundamental in the response we can have in emergencies, and also in protracted crisis context as well. For example, in Colombia, when an emergency phase occurs, we have the capacity to reply because of, or thanks to, the local partners with whom we are working, who have the capacity to go in some areas where we don't have capacity to go. So they are the ones who actually are in capacity to deliver, and we need to be able to support them in advance to the crisis, of course. I would say also that the collaboration, not only with local authority and local partner, but the collaboration needs to exist as well among operators through mine action AORs, of course, but not only, it can be also through the emergency risk education task team that can provide some support if needed, and now the EORE that I just presented could also provide some support if needed. But we need also to coordinate not only among mine action operators and mine action actors, but also beyond that. We need to make sure that we include in our discussions other humanitarian actors, for instance, from protection, from food distributions, from shelters, because they are the ones who will provide the first response, right? And basically, when we are in a crisis setting, people are seeking for food, health, shelter, that's basically, and protection. That's basically what they are looking for. And risk education, most of the time, does not appear like as a first need. That's why we have to make sure that we are integrated into other sectors. Providing risk education in health facilities, in food distributions, in shelter itself, it is the best way to reach people with life-saving messages without putting on their back, let's say, the burden to have to look for information while being already in an extremely difficult situation. And of course, in addition to that, we need to make sure that we are in capacity to follow minimum quality standards, so adapt our messages and our response to the threat, to the context, to the audience, and not only at organization level, but as I mentioned, collectively, through mine action AORs, through risk education task team, whatever the places. We just need to make sure that we are talking to each other and we are complementing each other rather than duplicating efforts.
Thank you, Alois, for speaking to us about how what is delivered quickly must also be trusted and understood by the communities that are already overwhelmed or fearful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this brings me to Safa. The question that I have for you is, how can emergency EORE be better integrated into broader child protection education systems, which really is talking about how can the risk education protect without traumatizing or overwhelming the very children it is meant to serve? Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam, for this question. It's really important. Honestly, effective way of delivering EORE is not to be as a standalone activity, but to be embedded in other systems as education. As I mentioned, when we embedded the EORE messages in the national curriculum. So when we design it, we consider the age of the child, the development stage that the child is passing. So it will be really fit with this, this age. And also we do sort of mainstreaming of MHPSS principles and child protection principles on those messages. So could be raising the awareness of the child without causing any trauma for them. The second platform is child protection. When we deliver EORE through child protection services, that will help us to more identify or better identify children who are really at risk, and to have a, let's say, safe referral to them through case management or through referral system. On the other side, we can also, as I see that the integrated EORE in health services, including vaccination campaign or any health service, that will help us to more reach community who are really in need and to wider disseminate EORE messages there. Besides that, we are working now on integrated EORE with livelihood, as this is very critical in Syria, since the most driver who are pushing people for risky behavior is the economic level. So they are going to collect a trough or scrap metal collecting, so that will put them under risk. So coordinating with livelihood sector and embedded messages through, let's say, Ministry of Economic, for example, and Ministry of Agriculture. So the farmers, for example, can take their seeds and with full baggage of EORE messages, so they will be aware before going for their land there is risk there. And also livelihood sector could help us in referral cases who are really in need to have more or alternative livelihood opportunities and not putting themselves under risk. So this is how I see that better way of integrated EORE in other, let's say, areas or other sectors. Thank you.
Thank you, Safa, for sharing that very important perspective. And this brings me to Mr. Colleen. My question for you is, how important is the integration of EORE and CPP with other humanitarian activities during a crisis? And can you give us some example from Palestine?
Yeah, I think the other speakers spoke a lot about how important it is, and it's extremely important in a context like Gaza, but it may not always be easy. At the outset of the crisis in Gaza, we had very limited access, and of course the needs were immediate for people when it came to food security and emergency response. And so one thing that was effectively done in Gaza at the time was pairing EORE and CPP print materials with food packages, NFI packages, as well as soup kitchen activities in the Gaza Strip in order to reach people while they're gathered and receiving supercritical food assistance. We also have had, we don't have real clearance happening at real scale in the Gaza Strip, but we do have EOD operators conducting explosive hazard assessments, or EHAs. And a key component of our risk education response is that when these EHAs confirm or a suspect hazardous area, that we're able to deploy explosive ordnance risk education teams to those communities in order to try to raise awareness in those communities and mitigate risk. We've seen UNICEF very effectively integrating EORE and CPP messaging into its child protection support activities. through training up focal points who have been, over the last 2.5 years, directly supporting with case management and able to also provide safety messaging at the same time to people who need it. It was mentioned MHPSS, of course, in the Gaza Strip, where the trauma of the armed conflict is so pronounced and impactful. Making sure that MHPSS activities, especially for children, can carry some of this EORE CPP safety messaging really helps to get these messages out to those who need it. And of course, we have actors also conducting camp management and shelter activities where through those activities, through that support, we're also able to deploy EORE and CPP trainers to those areas and organize trainings accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Colling. So I'm going to briefly take a statement from Mag. Yeah. Please, the floor is yours.
I'm here.
Okay.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thanks to the panelists for their insights. Here, second last row. Mariam, hi. Okay. Okay. We would like to share a short statement on behalf of Minds Advisory Group in support of this important topic. At MAG, we witness every day the devastating consequences of explosive weapons used in populated areas. Beyond the immediate toll, contamination continues to threaten entire communities for years, even decades, long after hostilities have ceased. As highlighted in the EORE Declaration, explosive ordnance risk education is an essential protection measure, particularly during displacement, periods of active hostilities, and in the early stages of response when humanitarian actors may not yet be able to safely access affected communities, as was discussed about Gaza, etc. Alongside EORE, MAG's experience shows that conflict preparedness and protection, CPP, is critical in helping people anticipate, survive, and recover from the use of explosive weapons. These approaches and coordinated efforts to strengthen EORE preparedness during and before active conflict deserve stronger and more systematic support.
Sorry, can you please tilt the mic to you a little bit more? Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay, thank you.
Hope that's better. So on the CPP, we just wanted to highlight that there will be a dedicated side event on this topic before lunch tomorrow, Thursday, organized by the EORE Advisory Group. We also emphasize the importance of integrating psychosocial support into EORE during and after conflict, ideally through trained professionals, as we do in Gaza. Recognizing the profound mental and emotional impact of explosive violence on affected populations. At the same time, mainstreaming of HMA in the wider humanitarian response is critical and should be prioritized. Marking, clearance, removal, destruction of explosive ordnance remain indispensable to reduce civilian harm in the long term. These efforts are essential for humanitarian access, the restoration of basic services, recovery and reconstruction, and enabling the safe return of displaced persons. In this context, it is more important than ever to uphold and reaffirm obligations under all existing international humanitarian frameworks. In addition, strengthening early response networks, supporting local actors, investing in regional capacity, and safeguarding humanitarian personnel must be central to implementation. Finally, prevention must guide our collective efforts. Meaningful engagement with governmental and non-governmental actors is essential to strengthen the policies and practices that mitigate civilian harm, including through greater restraint in the use of explosive weapons in populated areas and upholding IHL. It is also important to continue promoting and supporting initiatives such as the EORE Advisory Group, which recently has been instrumental in bringing together practitioners across the sector to enhance emergency risk education, as highlighted in this session today. Such efforts are critical to reducing long-term human suffering and the immense costs associated with reconstruction. We thank you.
Thank you so much for that intervention. I think we would be able to take about 2 to 3 questions. I'm seeing Jordan, okay, Azerbaijan, Nigeria, China, okay. Okay, we start with the 4. I think we can stretch it a bit. Okay, IOCTR. Okay. Can we start with Jordan, please? Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أشكركم على هاي المعلومات اللي أديتوا فيها من السودان وعن سوريا عن غزة والضفة الغربية. معلومات قيمة جدا. فأنا حاب بس أعلق أو إكمالا اللي تفضلت فيه الأخت عن سوريا، إنه أنا مدير عام الهيئة الوطنية لإزالة الغام والتأهيل في الأردنية. بس حبيت أحطكم بالصورة إنه بالنسبة لإخواننا اللي موجودين السوريين بالأردن، إحنا عملنا برنامج توعية في بعد عام 2012 واستطعنا إنه نعمل حملات توعية ل 400,000 شخص من سوريا، بالإضافة إنه عملنا تدريب TOT ل 400 واحد. ركزنا هذيك الأيام على الناس اللي متوقعين رايحين يرجعوا لسوريا. طبعا رجع منهم قسم قليل جدا، ولكن كملنا التوعية معهم. في عام 2025 آخر 3 أشهر بدعم من اليونيسف برضو عملنا حملات توعية ل 3000 أخ وأخت سورية. هذول المتوقعين رايحين يرجعوا لسوريا، وفي ناس منهم رجع اوريدي. في المفروض انه احنا نقوم في حملة توعية اعتبارا من 1/5/2026 ولغاية عام 2027 نقوم بحملات توعية برضو للإخوان السوريين بدعم من اليونيسف اللي متوقعين، ونتأمل أنهم رايحين يرجعوا بسلامة إلى وطنهم. إحنا كهيئة وطنية مستعدين نعطي أي معلومات لأخواننا السوريين عن الناس اللي دربناهم، الناس اللي عملنا لهم دورات توعية، وعن الجماعة اللي رايحين إحنا ندربهم كمان. فأهلا وسهلا فيهم أي وقت بدهم، وشكرا لكم.
Thank you so much for that intervention, Jordan. Thank you. Please, a round of applause, and then we will move to, okay, IOCTR.
Thank you very much. My name is Sufyan Al-Sous from IOCTR. First of all, I would like to thank all the panels for their really rich presentations. And I also like to thank Jordan, Mr. Urekat, because I was part of this training a long time ago. We all know that the victims of the mines are 90%, 80%, more than 51% are women's, old men's, children. The point which I want to highlight that until now there is no rules for in the mine actions to protect these people. Nobody says anything about their right to protect. So I suggest, if it is possible, to add this point to the IMAS or UNMAS or whatever, just to put it as a law, that these people who don't know anything, I know that we do a lot to let them know after, but before, we have to protect them before anybody put the mines. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your intervention. I believe it is well noted by colleagues in the room. Thank you. Let's go to Asia. China, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. To begin with, on behalf of the Chinese delegation,
Sorry, sir, can you please tilt the mic a bit to you? Thank you very much.
To begin with, on behalf of Chinese delegation, I wish to extend our sincere appreciation to IACGMA and GICHD for convening this meeting. From today's meeting and some side events, we really felt the passion of the international community on mine action, and also understood the various challenges currently we are facing. The theme of this meeting, One Humanity, which reminded me the vision of building a community with a sharing future for humanity, had been put forward by Chinese President Xi Jinping, complemented by the Global Development Initiative the Global Security Initiative, the Global Civilization Initiative, and the Global Governance Initiative. The meeting's theme, the One Humanity, resonated deeply with this vision, and the initiatives offer Chinese-wide and solutions for building a better world, as well as mindful world. We stand ready to work with the international community to implement the GSI, intensify demining assistance, and provide assistance to affected countries to the best of our ability. That's our comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention. Nigeria, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mariam, and your panelists for the engaging discussion. My name is Abubakar Abdullahi Suleiman from the Center for Social Cohesion, Peace and Empowerment, Nigeria. My question goes to HI. I would want to learn more about the Risk Education Task Team and want you to highlight the role of communities and the affected population on the task team. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So when it comes to the Emergency Risk Education Task Team, so it is currently co-chaired by HI indeed, but also NPA, actually both of us. So it's not only about HI. The idea of this task team is really to gather technical specialists across organization, mainly so far from INGO, but we are also looking for local organization and also some national authorities that are part of this fora. And the idea of the Emergency Risk Education Task Team is to avoid duplication of work among operators. We want to share good practices. We want to share our experience. We all have our strong experience in risk education. We need to gather those knowledge, those experiences, capitalize on it. And so the idea of the Emergency Risk Education Task Team is really that. Developing common tools, developing common guidance so we can implement risk education in CPP in a more unified way. So it is at global level. The idea, obviously, is then for each organization to make sure that the tools, the guidance that we are producing as task team will be shared widely, not only with our colleagues on the field, but also with our local partners on the field. If you are interested in the work that we are doing, I would be more than happy to take a moment with you so we can explain you more in depth what we are doing. And we hope that in the coming weeks, hopefully months, we will have the capacity to have all the tools developed by the task team available on the GICHD website. So it's going to be more easier for everyone to have access to the dashboards or to the tools, briefing papers, etc. that we are producing. I hope it answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And really thank you to our distinguished panelists and to everyone who has contributed to this conversation, whether by listening or by speaking. What has emerged clearly from this session is that emergency risk education is not only about information, it is about timing, trust, and transmission. Timing because in emergencies, delays can be devastating. Trust because messages that are not trusted are not acted upon, and transmission because knowledge must move quickly, effectively through systems, through communities, and ultimately through people. We have also heard about the importance of sustainability in the face of constraint. We've also heard about the non-negotiables required to act in urgency, and the need to also integrate risk education into broader systems, whether national structures, humanitarian responses, or child protection and education frameworks. But beyond the frameworks and approaches, one thread on this panel has been constant, which is that the success of the work depends not only on what is designed, but on what is understood, retained, and acted upon by those most at risk. It depends on the teacher who adapts a message for the students, the community member who becomes a trusted source of information, or the child who recognizes danger and chooses a different path. And perhaps this is where the convergence we discussed today between explosive ordnance risk education and conflict preparedness and protection find its deepest meaning, because at its core, this is about equipping people not just to respond to danger, but to navigate it and survive it. So as we leave this session today, the question is not only how do we scale our approaches, but how do we ensure that in the most critical moments, the right knowledge reaches the right person at the right time. Because in that moment, risk education is no longer a program. It becomes the difference between harm and safety, between loss and the continuation of life. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to you, the distinguished panelists. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.